The hallway felt smaller than it ever had, like the walls were quietly closing in as I stood there, staring at the envelope that had just changed the temperature of the entire house. The bulb above me flickered in an uneven heartbeat. Light, shadow, stretching long, trembling silhouettes over the photo frames lining the wall. Each picture, birthdays, school uniforms, my parents' tired but soft smiles, watched me with a kind of silent pity, as if they already knew what the letter carried before I even opened it. Micah inside was stiff, crisp, too official to belong in a place built on memories. My fingers shook as I unfolded it. A property transfer, a sale agreement, a signature I didn't recognize, and then the empty space where my name should have been, blank, deliberate, erased. For a moment, the air felt colder, like someone had opened a window to let winter crawl straight across my skin. I read the paragraph 3 times, each word sinking deeper, sharper, until the truth finally settled in my chest with a weight that felt impossible to breathe through. My brother sold our family home, a Betik, without me, without telling me, without even a conversation. The bulb buzzed above, casting a sickly yellow glow over the paper, and I felt my heartbeat thud through my palms, through the floor, through every memory this house ever held. Dust floated lazily in the stillness, the kind of quiet that only comes before something breaks. And in that moment, standing in the home our parents built, I realized something had already broken long before this letter arrived. The house had always spoken in small sounds, soft groans in the wooden steps, the faint whistle of wind slipping through the kitchen window, the delicate rustle of old book pages whenever someone walked past the study. Even now, as I moved through it, with that letter still trembling inside my grip, every familiar sound felt heavier, like the house itself was grieving. The scent of my mother's sandalwood oil still lived in the hallway corners. The garden she planted, rose bushes she swore responded to music, pressed against the windows with shadows shaped like memory. This place wasn't property. It was the geography of our entire childhood, the last place our parents' voices still echoed in corners untouched by time. After they passed, everything between me and my brother changed in ways I never fully understood. There was a time when we moved like a pair. Same jokes, same late-night kitchen raids, same conspiracies whispered beneath blanket forts. But the day our father died, something in him tightened. He spoke less, listened less, and somewhere between grief and responsibility, he began to behave like the house belonged more to him than to both of us. He carried that subtle air of superiority, like every bill he paid was a crown, every decision he made was a throne. He never said the words out loud, but I felt it in the way he regarded me, like I was a guest in my own home, someone who didn't understand the weight he claimed to bear. Then came the debts, whispers at first, then sharp truths that couldn't be ignored. A failed business, some investment gone wrong, partnerships with people he never introduced, deals he shrugged off whenever I asked. I thought he would talk to me. I thought family meant sharing, even the ugly parts. Instead, he built walls, thick ones. Every time I offered help, he swatted it away with pride that felt more like fear. He kept insisting everything was handled, that I didn't need to worry. And I believed him, because trusting him felt easier than imagining he could betray us both. Mornings where rarely arrives announced. It collects quietly, in half-truths, in clipped conversations, in the way someone stops meeting your eyes when money becomes a shadow between you. Still, part of me held on to the boy he used to be. I can still see that day in the living room, the day we decided to repaint the walls because we'd seen a DIY makeover on TV and thought it looked easy. We were kids, standing in oversized shirts, holding rollers twice our size. We splattered paint across the floor, across each other, even across the cat, who never forgave us for it. We laughed until our stomachs hurt. The sun poured through the windows in warm, golden sheets, turning everything into a glowing, chaotic memory. The walls dried uneven, but our parents didn't care. They said the house looked happier. Escorted, that room still holds the uneven patches we never fixed. Even now, when I run my fingers across the wall, I can feel every brushstroke of that afternoon. Our laughter, our innocence, the simplicity of believing nothing could ever push us apart. But as I stand here now, the present sits in colder colors. The light feels duller. Shadows stretch longer. The house feels uncertain, like it's waiting for me to tell it what comes next. Somewhere between the boy who painted with me and the man who sold our home behind my back, a line was crossed. And I realized, painfully, quietly, that the house wasn't the only thing he had abandoned. I called him once, then twice, then 7 more times, each ring stretching longer than the last, each silence heavier, thicker, like the quiet was mocking me. His voicemail played again and again in that detached, practiced tone. Leave a message. But what message could I leave for someone who had already crossed a line without looking back? By the 10th call, the silence felt louder than shouting, louder than betrayal itself. It wasn't avoidance. It was confirmation. I grabbed the document and drove straight to the address printed in cold black ink at the bottom, the real estate office. The air inside smelled of fresh toner and cheap cologne. Behind the front desk, a young receptionist straightened up too quickly when she saw the paper in my hand. Her eyes flicked toward it, then to me, then back again, like she already knew what storm I had walked in with. She shuffled through a stack of files, her fingers trembling just enough for me to notice. After a long, uncomfortable minute, she spoke without meeting my eyes. Yes, it's already in process. Just like that. Cure, my home, our home, reduced to a line in a file folder and a nervous shrug. Turbulence seemed to shrink around me. People in polished shoes and pressed suits passed by, glancing at me with that strange mixture of curiosity and mild pity, the kind reserved for someone who walked into a problem they should have known about. It wasn't loud humiliation. It was subtle, quiet, the kind that creeps under your skin. They looked at me like someone who'd lost track of their own life. Like my brother's signature was the only one that truly mattered. Like the absence of my name wasn't a mistake, but a reflection of how little my presence meant. I left before the frustration could spill into my voice. My hands were cold around the steering wheel when I reached home. The house felt even more hollow than before, as if it sensed it had been bartered away without consent. I went straight to the old wooden drawers in the study, the ones with stiff handles and the faint smell of ink and dust. I pulled everything out, tax papers, birth certificates, school records, brittle envelopes with my father's handwriting. Finally, beneath a pile of old festival photos, I found them, the original ownership documents. 6th, our names, right there, side by side, undeniable, migrated. My breath shook, not from relief, but from the contrast between what was true and what my brother had chosen to pretend was true. As I organized the papers, something else surfaced in my memory, a small moment, a simple one. Months ago, he had asked me casually, almost too casually, for a copy of my ID. "Bank needs it," he'd said. "Some verification thing." He'd laughed it off, and I didn't think twice. Family doesn't question family over paperwork, or so I believed back then. Negligence. Now, with the letters spread across the carpet, the realization settled bitterly. He hadn't needed my ID for any bank. He needed it to imitate me, to sign for me, to erase me. A low rumble echoed outside. The storm had started, thick raindrops tapping against the windows in a slow, relentless rhythm. It felt like the sky was rehearsing the heaviness I'd been carrying quietly for years. I sat on the floor, papers around me like scattered fragments of a truth I should have seen sooner. My fingers traced over signatures, stamps, dates, each one revealing more of the truth he had tried to bury. The rain grew louder, blurring the edges of the world outside. Inside, the dim light bounced off the white papers, creating a soft glow against the shadows. This wasn't the kind of pain that breaks instantly. It was the kind that unfolds slowly, deliberately, layer by layer, until something inside you stops trembling, because it finally knows what needs to be done. Somewhere between the tapping rain and the soft rustle of legal documents, something shifted in me. Hurt began to harden, confusion began to sharpen, and dread, cold and quiet as it was, started transforming into something steadier. Resolve. Her office was brighter than I expected, sunlight pouring through tall windows, reflecting off polished wooden shelves stacked with thick law books. The lawyer stood the moment I entered, an older woman with sharp eyes that seemed to cut straight through pretense. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. The moment the documents touched her desk, she slipped on her glasses and began reading with the precision of someone examining a crime scene. Her eyebrows arched at the forged signature, tightened at the altered ID copy, and finally settled into a frown when she reached the transfer date. "This isn't just wrong," she said quietly. "It's sloppy." Somehow, that mixture, wrong and sloppy, hurt more than anything. My brother didn't just betray me. He didn't even care enough to do it carefully. She pushed the documents back toward me and asked for everything else I had. So we gathered, for hours. Utility bills with both our names. Name receipts where he had once signed proudly as co-owner. Flooring shots of messages. Him asking me to split property tax, to approve repairs. Clear evidence he acknowledged my share long before greed made him rewrite the truth. Even the bank statements showed the pattern. Shared payments, shared expenses, shared responsibility. Piece by piece, the story of our ownership assembled across her desk like a mosaic of facts that couldn't be ignored. By early afternoon, she leaned back in her chair, fingers interlocked, calculating. "We can stop the transfer," she said, "at least temporarily. There's enough here to challenge this." Hearing those words felt like oxygen. A small victory, fragile but real. She filed an emergency stay, her tone calm, efficient, like she had done this dance with betrayal many times before. But what she said next froze me. Carn self pushed hard for a fast sale, insisted there'd be no sibling involvement. My heart stuttered. No sibling involvement, as if my existence was an inconvenience he wanted erased from the paperwork. As if he knew, as if they both knew. That suspicion burned quietly in my chest as I drove to the address listed for the buyer, a construction site masked as an investment property. The sky was overcast, pale and cold. The buyer stood near a half-finished wall, arms folded, expression as blank as concrete. I introduced myself, but he didn't bother offering his name. His smile was thin, brittle. "I bought the house legally," he repeated, every time I asked anything. Not why it was rushed, nicknamed "Don't to confirm the price." Not why he didn't ask about the other owner. Just that one line. It felt rehearsed, like he'd prepared it in a mirror. Every question I asked made him lean back farther, hands tucked deeper into his pockets, like transparency was something he'd choke on if he tried to swallow it. By the time I walked away, the truth was clear. Whatever my brother had done wasn't a mistake. It was a partnership built on convenience and secrecy. The evening light had already faded when I returned home. Shadows stretched long across the hallway, filling the house with the same dimness that had greeted me the night the letter arrived. I set the documents on the table and exhaled, feeling the exhaustion settle into my bones. That's when my phone buzzed. His name flashed on the screen. For a second, I just watched it ring. Then I answered. No greeting, no apology. Bilingual. Sailed irritation. "You're making this bigger than it needs to be," he said. "Just let it go." Resign? At go, home our parents built was a piece of junk furniture. Let it go, like my signature was optional. Let it go, like I should quietly shrink myself to fit whatever version of the story he found most convenient. His voice wasn't angry, it was dismissive, kissing, and that hurt in a way that was strangely clarifying. It was in that moment, standing in the dark corridor of the house he tried to erase me from, that something finally snapped into place. Not anger, not grief. Self-worth. For the first time, I didn't hear my brother. I heard a man who no longer knew me, and I realized that I no longer owed him the softness he took advantage of. The storm outside had slowed, but inside me, something was just beginning to rise. The courthouse was silent in a way that pressed against my chest, colder than the autumn air outside. The marble floors gleamed, reflecting the harsh white lights above, each footstep I took echoing like a warning. I held my documents tightly, fingers gripping the edges until my knuckles ached. At the far end of the hall, he was there, my brother, leaning slightly against the wall, hands buried in his pockets, eyes darting everywhere except toward me. It was as though acknowledging my presence would expose the truth he had spent weeks trying to bury. His posture was stiff, almost defensive, and for a fleeting moment I saw the boy I grew up with, the same one who had once laughed so freely in our living room, now reduced to someone trying to hide behind appearances. Walking into the courtroom felt like stepping into a different universe. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and old paper, mingled with the subtle metallic tang of cold justice. The buyer sat beside his attorney, a man whose posture radiated confidence, each movement practiced, calculated. The moment the proceedings began, the lawyer launched into his performance with a smooth, predatory precision. Words like legitimate contracts, properly filed documents, and full consent given by the seller rang through the room, their cadence so polished it could have been rehearsed in a mirror. Every syllable was meant to convince, meant to erase me from the story entirely. My brother nodded at every point, lips pressed into a thin line, chin lifted in a posture that screamed authority. He didn't look like someone who had made a mistake. He looked like someone trying to convince the world, and perhaps himself, that the betrayal he committed was justified. My chest ached with a quiet emptiness, not anger or shock, but the bitter recognition that the boy I once trusted had been replaced by a man who saw ownership as power and family as optional. Playback when the other side finally paused, the judge's gaze shifted toward us, sharp and deliberate. My lawyer rose slowly, smoothing the papers in front of her, moving with the confidence of someone who could see the gaps in the illusion and knew exactly how to exploit them. I stayed seated, grounding myself in the rhythm of my own breath, each inhale steadying the nervous hammering of my heart. In prison and the courtroom seemed to lean in, as though holding its breath with us. "Your Honor," she said, laying the documents out one by one, "this sale is built on structural flaws that cannot be ignored." First came the missing co-owner signature, my signature, deliberately absent. She tapped the blank line, letting the silence stretch, letting everyone feel the weight of what wasn't there. The empty space screamed louder than any accusation could. Then came the mismatched photocopy of my ID. She held it up alongside a verified version, the differences glaring, impossible to dismiss. The judge leaned forward slightly, fingers interlocked, his eyes narrowing with interest. Next, the timestamps. She presented evidence that the supposed consent documents were signed on the day I was verifiably across the city, backed by messages, bank transactions, and even a traffic toll slip. Each timestamp was a quiet dagger, slicing through the carefully constructed lie. Factions. Finally, she circled back to the financial trail. The sudden cash deposits into my brother's account just 2 days after the sale agreement. Numbers don't lie. Numbers never blink. And in this room, the numbers told the truth my brother had tried to bury. Deceit, greed, and betrayal all laid bare. Pink, the atmosphere changed, shifting like the air before a storm. The buyer's lawyer paused, confidence faltering. Even the judge's expression sharpened, moving from neutral observation to keen focus, leaning forward, elbows on the bench. You could feel the tension vibrate in the air, a silent charge between accusation and truth. Kissing my brother from the corner of my eye, his jaw was tight, fingers trembling slightly, posture rigid. For the first time, he didn't seem in control. The walls he had built to protect his lie were cracking, letting panic seep through. The boy I remembered, the one who used to sneak into the kitchen for midnight snacks with me, was gone, replaced by a man cornered by his own choices. The judge asked him to respond, and that's when everything unraveled. About stress, debts, confusion, and miscommunication. His words collided and tripped over one another, defensive at first, almost desperate later. He blamed the buyer for pressuring him. He blamed me for not being involved enough. He even tried to stretch grief for our parents into justification. Each excuse sounded thinner than the last, like paper trying to hold back the tide. And then, he let slip the truth he couldn't contain. "I didn't think they cared about the house anyway." The words hung in the air like ice. Silence roared. My mind raced through memories, painting walls together, laughing in the garden, our shared childhood stitched into every corner of that home. It all collapsed into that one confession. He hadn't sold the house out of necessity or misunderstanding. He had done it because, in his mind, my presence didn't matter. The judge's gavel came down like the strike of lightning. "The sale is hereby reversed in full," he declared. "The buyer will receive a refund. The defendant, my brother, will bear all legal costs, including restitution to the co-owner for attempted fraudulent transfer." The sound echoed, reverberating like the heartbeat of truth finally returning to its rightful place. Relief washed over me in a slow, unstoppable wave. The tension in my shoulders melted slightly. The courtroom seemed to exhale, the harsh lights softening as people began filing out, murmurs of shock and surprise trailing behind them. I gathered my papers, feeling a calm steadiness I hadn't felt in weeks. When I stepped into the hallway, there he was, waiting. He opened his mouth, perhaps to apologize, perhaps to explain, perhaps to defend himself one last time. I walked past him. He reached out slightly, voice low. "Just listen." I stopped for a single heartbeat and said the words that had been gathering in my chest since the night the letter arrived. Family doesn't mean ownership. His hand fell, his eyes dropped, and for the first time he saw the distance he had created, the gap between what he wanted and what was real, a distance too wide to bridge with excuses. I walked forward, each step echoing like a quiet victory through the cold, bright corridor, leaving behind the shadows of betrayal, and stepping into a world that was finally mine. The air outside felt warmer, lighter, and even the fading echoes of the gavel seemed to hum with possibility. The storm had passed, the reckoning was complete, and for the first time in a long time, I could breathe without guilt, without fear, without someone else trying to dictate my claim to life, home, and dignity. The morning light filtered through the curtains in gentle streams, brushing the walls with a soft glow that felt almost like forgiveness. I walked barefoot across the living room floor, each step stirring faint dust motes that danced lazily in the sunbeams. The house smelled faintly of old wood and faintly of rain from the night before, carrying a quiet sense of continuity, a reminder that, despite everything, it had survived. I moved slowly, letting my hands brush against the familiar surfaces, the banister that my father had polished, the bookshelf where I had once stacked novels too tall to reach, the frames that held frozen smiles of birthdays and holidays long past. I began small, a loose screw here, a crooked frame there. The garden still bore the traces of my mother's touch, and I poured water into the soil, listening to the soft gurgle of the watering can, as if it were a quiet hymn of renewal. Each action, mundane yet deliberate, felt like reclaiming something far bigger than screws or plants. It was the house itself, yes, but also the part of me that had felt erased by betrayal. Each repaired corner, each polished surface, was a gentle declaration. I had not been removed, and this home and I were still here. Sitting by the window, a cup of coffee steaming in my hands, I let my mind wander over the events of the past weeks. Family betrayal cuts the deepest because it is not just an attack from outside. It comes from the people who know the map of your heart. But what I have learned is that betrayal does not define the boundaries of my life. It is the courage to assert those boundaries, to insist on respect, that becomes the balm. Protecting yourself, even from those you love, is not selfish. It is necessary. It is the quiet act of preservation that allows life to continue in its own light. I traced my fingers over the edge of a photo frame, catching the faint reflection of the morning sun, and realized that the home I had feared losing is still standing. And so am I. The storm of anger, the tension of deceit, and the weight of disappointment had all been real, but they had also taught me the power of steadfastness, the quiet victory in holding one's ground with calm determination. I had walked through fire without letting it burn me, and the house around me, silent and serene, had witnessed it. Tightened in this stillness, I understood the final truth. Standing up for yourself is not vengeance. It is not about proving someone wrong or triumphing over them. It is preservation. It is reclaiming what is yours, not just in ownership, but in dignity, in memory, in the quiet certainty that your life remains your own. The walls, the books, the plants, even the sunlight streaming through the windows, all of it whispers that what is taken can be restored, that what is broken can be mended, that what is yours, in essence, can never truly be erased. I rose and walked slowly through the home one last time before leaving for the day, each step a reminder of presence, of resilience. The rooms no longer felt heavy. They felt alive with possibility, with memory, and with the silent strength of having endured. I paused at the doorway, inhaled the faint scent of wood and rain, and smiled quietly. The house was back. So was I. And that, I realized, was more than enough.